Okay, I've been cataloging dolls for 50 years, and the great fun, the greatest pleasure of my study and research and cataloging is that there is always something new to learn. When Mr. Butkus started talking to us about this collection, he talked about his collection of Neapolitan and Genoese figures. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't want to appear too ignorant. So I just said casually, oh, tell me about the Genoese figures. And he told me some things, and I still had not a clue what he was talking about. So I dug into it, and here's what I found. There really isn't much out there. Within the traditional doll collecting circles, I would call people that I knew that handled wooden dolls or handled early dolls, and I said, tell me about Genoese dolls, and there was this blank look on their face, and then even blanker would be the information because no one knew what they were talking about. So I just kept digging and digging and digging, and what I found out is, talk about a fertile field that you could enter into, and I mean, it's extraordinary. You could buy these pieces at a fraction of what they should be worth because of their age and their artistry and their intriguing, fascinating story. Let me tell you what I have learned. I have found, first of all, some books. This is an exhibition that was done in the Palazzo Rosto, all right, in Genoa. And it shows some of the dolls that we'll be showing you here today. This is another book that was done more recently on Principio Genovese, all right, and shows some of the rare pieces that we have here. And then one other book that was done, Principio Genovese. Once more, I am cursed. They're all in Italian. And I found, like, I was using Google Translate paragraph by paragraph to get as much information as I could. And then gradually I started to piece things together, and I found such absolutely intriguing information. These dolls date almost a half century earlier than the Neapolitan dolls. They're from the late 1600s, early 1700s. And even though the basic theme was the same, they arose out of the nativity tradition of trying to build a scene of everyday city life or country life or peasant life or marketplace life. Everything else differed. First of all, what differed is you have to think of where Genoa is. We have Naples further south. We have Genoa here. And what do we have over here? We have the Bavarian section of Germany and Austria. And there we always think of wooden dolls. And that is probably why the Genovese dolls are made of wood. And your first instinct when you see them is to think Bavarian, the early German dolls that were being made in the mid-17th, early 18th century. But they're not. These are very, very distinctive. Their faces are extraordinary. They're highly stylized. So we have dolls that are kind of a blend of the two traditions, the Bavarian carved wooden doll and the Neapolitan nativity doll. And from that came these wonderful dolls known as Genoese dolls. I learned a fascinating thing, and when you look at these dolls and you think about this fact, I think, boy, everything for me became really clear. Genoa was a major shipbuilding city, and as part of shipbuilding, another corollary industry that grew up in that city was the making of ship figureheads. And if you have ever noticed ship figureheads that every ship had in the 17th, 18th century, the figures of usually a woman or a mythological figure or a god on the front of the ship as they sailed forward, they would have this figurehead on the ship. And that industry grew up in Genoa, and many of the same people who worked on the modeling of the ship's figureheads also worked on the modeling of this line of Genoese dolls. The dolls differ from the Neapolitan in another very, very famous thing too. So their material is different. They're not terracotta like the Neapolitan. They're wooden. Their bodies are different. The Neapolitan dolls were wire armature with toe-wrapped bodies, and that could be posed, just gently bending them one way or another. The Genoese dolls are wooden articulated, and in the catalog we show a picture of the various type of mortise and tenon, all wooden bodies that they have. The bodies of the Genoese dolls tend to be fairly crude because they were never designed to be exposed. They were always designed to be costumed. And what would be the point of putting labor into finishing off the bodies? They wanted to be able to have them articulated so you could pose them, but they didn't really care what they looked like. Another feature in which they're different, they are so strong in their characterization, so strong. Some people have looked at them, and I will admit I did too when I first saw them, and I was a little taken aback because at first glance, well, some of them are just too highly characterized, and they're strong. They're so strong. But the more you look at them and the more you study them, the more you really realize how wonderfully they interact together in like a conversational pieces, like these two, the gentleman and the lady talking to each other. And I want to turn them around too because I want you also to see how, as a Neapolitan, their sculpting worked all the way around. Look at the hair, beautifully detailed. This is all carved wood, all carved wood. If you wanted to see more of these, there are several museums in Genoa today that have exhibitions of these dolls. Let me tip her a little. I think you could see her better if I tip her hair so you can see that detail a little more. And then the gentleman as well. The more I looked at these, the more I really came to like them, and I realized each of their faces are completely different. This one, look at how strong that face is. But can't you see that like a ship's figurehead almost? And then turn it around. The ribbons on here are not carved. That's a cloth ribbon on her hair, but it's a very tightly coiled bun at the back with side wings coming down. And then here's one, and it's sort of the same, but not really. She's almost like her younger sister. And then I love this aristocratic older couple. She said, "I'm not listening to you anymore." But look at how they pose together. They really make a great pose. And then they did, this is a very, very famous one of their beggar. It's incredible. Even the musculature in the legs and the feet, and it's just extraordinary. This cap, I will point out to you, is not a cloth cap. That is a sculpted, carved wooden hat. Carved wooden hat on him. He's an extraordinary piece of work. And then, even sadder, is the crippled man, the one-legged man with a wooden leg. His peg leg is a wooden leg, and it's like on a dowel, so it could pivot upward. It's just an extraordinary work of art. Again, a wooden hat on this guy. Here's one of the more unusual ones that they did. I don't know this hairstyle, but I can't help but think that there's some story to it. First of all, look at the profile of his face. Very, very strong chin with a carved black beard, very rich complexion. But look at that hair. Long loop curls on the sides, and then in the back, this long looped curl that comes down and then is drawn up. The more I've looked into all of these dolls, the Genoese and the Neapolitan, the more I'm convinced that many of them were based on being portraits of actual people at the time. And hopefully, again, that's something that can be discovered and evolved, and more information coming out as more and more research is done. But that is a very extraordinary piece. And then, finally, from the Genoese, this wonderful, the Genoese did many wonderful carved animals, and they did this great helmeted soldier and this wonderful carved wooden horse on its original wooden platform. This is all wooden. All of the original leather and cloth saddlery is still on this horse. This is a sculpted helmet, and he's holding his original implements of war. A very, very grand piece, an original costume. So these are just great pieces. And then finally in this auction, I'm going to bring you to some of the most curious things I've seen, in which I will admit that I believe I cataloged them wrong in the catalog. I called them the Genoese, but on further reflection and further study and further commentary from Mr. Butkus, I believe now that these are Bavarian. And he pointed me to a book, and this is done by the Bayerische National Museum. And if any of you go to Munich, I urge you, please, please go to search out this museum. They have on their lower level, the entire lower level is dedicated to their collection of Neapolitan, Bavarian, and Austrian carved wooden figures and nativity scene figures and the street scenes and everything. It's the most extraordinary place I've ever been. I went there like 4 years ago. I just had a day to spend, and I just happened to walk into it, and I was blown away. It's wonderful. And so I had this book all along, and then I found in here this almost centerfold of these same characters, in which they talk about them and talk about this whole line of fantastical creatures. And I actually was able, again, using a little bit of Google Translate, cut and paste, to get some of the information. And this fellow in particular, who had intrigued me, look at this guy, this animal with his little baby animals on his back and his long tail. So what I was able to find out, and I'm going to read it to you, it was evidently, it was a fierce and fast figure described by the Jesuit priest Pedro Lozano in the early 1700s. In Patagonia, which is in South America, so that's kind of strange, a very fierce animal can be found. It is called a Sioux, or according to others, Sukarath, and it is usually found on the riverbanks. It has a hideous figure. At first sight, it seems to have the face of a lion or even that of a man, because from its ears grows a beard with hair that is not too long. Its body narrows toward the rear. Its front end is very large. Its tail is long and very hairy, and with it, it hides the pups that it places on its back. This did not prevent it from running swiftly away. And it says that the Sioux or Sukarath found its way into European Christmas celebrations. Many of the Neapolitan scenes carved in Munich in the early 1800s depicted it with its young on its back, and it was considered to be a symbol of the flight to Egypt. So just extraordinary figures, but I mean, look at this fellow. I just think he's extraordinary. I love all of these pieces. Extremely rare and documented in this book from the Bayerische Museum. So they're wonderful pieces to have. And while we're there, I just wanted to show you two more of the architectural props from the Hanna Butkus collection, two of the original pieces. So we're going to have a great time going through all of these pieces. It's going to be a long day. We're going to have many wonderful pieces. I think you're all going to surprise me again on which ones you love that I maybe didn't pay that much attention to, and which ones I love that maybe you don't like. But that's what collecting is all about, isn't it? It's loving and learning and making new friends and good community. And I look forward to sharing that all with you. Thanks very much for listening to me, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.